to talk about absolute value, and the I can statement we're working on is I can find and use the absolute value to solve problems. So let's begin. What is absolute value? Well, absolute value is a number's distance from zero. Now, in our previous videos and lessons, we talked a little bit about opposites, and opposites are two integers that have the same distance from zero. So you're always going to be able to find two numbers that have the same absolute value, okay? So absolute value, think about if you were to buy a car. You get it off the lot, brand new, has 0 miles on it, and you drive 5 miles north. Your car would now read that it has 5 miles on it. But if you went back and drove, turned around and went back to the car lot, your car would add another 5 miles to it, even though you're going in the opposite direction, okay? So when we're talking about absolute value, we are talking, we're not subtracting values when we're going in a negative direction, okay? It's a distance, and distance can never be negative because it's always something that we are positively adding or doing to a figure or moving ourselves in some way. Okay, so it's your distance from zero. And if we think about it on a number line, 3 has a distance of 3 from zero. Now, to write absolute value, we use these straight vertical lines on either side of the number. That is how we indicate absolute value. So I would read this right here. The absolute value of 3 equals 3, because 3 is 3 units away from zero. Now let's look at its opposite, negative 3. Negative 3 also has an absolute value of 3 because it is still 3 hops away from zero. It's just going in a different direction. The absolute value of negative 4 is 4 because it is 4 places or 4 hops from zero. The absolute value of positive 1 is 1 because it is 1 unit away from zero. The absolute value of negative 2 is 2 because it is 2 units away from zero. So let's take a minute. Keep in mind, absolute value does not mean change the sign of the number. It means how far away from zero it is, whereas opposites mean we're going to change the sign of the number. Absolute value tells us how far away a number is from zero. So pause the video, try these out. Okay, let's see how you did. Now, we use absolute value when we're evaluating sometimes. And the symbols that we use for absolute value, we treat them as if they're parentheses. It's a grouping symbol. So if I were to do 12 plus 13, the absolute value of that quantity, I'm going to first add 12 and 13 to get 25, and then take the absolute value of 25, which is 25. Let's look at another one. 30 minus 12. I want the absolute value of that. I'm going to take 30 minus 12, which is 18, and then take the absolute value of 18, which is 18. But when I get to a problem like this, 4 minus 6, think of it this way. I gave you $4, but I owe you $6. So what does that mean? That means I still owe you $2. So now I still have a negative 2 in my absolute value. But since I want the absolute value of that, how far away from zero is negative 2? It's 2. So that's where that absolute value symbol becomes very important to treat as a parenthesis. Let's look at another one. The absolute value of 10 minus 16. Think about it. I give you $10, but I owe you $16. That still puts me at a negative 6. But what's the absolute value of that negative 6? 6. So I'm going to do the work inside the absolute value symbol, then take the absolute value. Now, when I have a problem like this, the absolute value of negative 14 plus the absolute value of 16, notice this plus sign is not in the absolute value symbols here. So what that means is I need to take the absolute value first. What's the absolute value of negative 14? 14. What's the absolute value of 16? 16. Now I can add. So the placement of the absolute value symbols is very important to understand. You do what you work out or take care of what's inside those symbols, and then you might need to add or subtract later. Let's look at another one. The absolute value of 7 the absolute value of -7 plus the absolute value of -8. First, I'm going to take the absolute value of those numbers. The absolute value of -7 is 7. The absolute value of -8 is 8. Then I'm going to add those numbers. 7 plus 8 is 15. So just like parentheses, I got to take care of the absolute value symbols. Then I might need to do something else afterwards. So now it's your turn. Pause the video. Try to solve these problems. Okay, let's see how you did. We are done with this video. You can go back and watch any portion as many times as you need, but don't forget to WSQ in your notes, and have a good day.